Hi everybody, this is Megan Wyatt with Wives of Jannah. So if you have gotten married and maybe you're in your first 6 months or 1 year of marriage, and you didn't fall in love before you got married, you might be wondering if your marriage is going to have the kind of love or the kind of passion that you hoped that it would have. And I say that because, women do a lot of comparing. I work with a lot of wives in coaching, and, there's comparison to whether that's media itself, movies and films and TV, but even just other people in your community. Maybe you had a friend and, she met someone through work or through an organization or at school, and she felt like, she'd fallen in love with this person, even though they didn't cross, any physical boundaries or anything like that. Just emotionally, she felt like she'd found the one and they got married, and alhamdulillah, it seems like their marriage is great. Whereas maybe you took a more, what we call traditional approach. You talked to, your husband to be in your parents' living room, and then you went to his house for dinner, and there wasn't a lot of unsupervised time. There wasn't texting and chatting or anything like that. Maybe some phone calls here and there, but you decided to marry based on a set of principles. And maybe you're wondering, is your marriage going to be like everybody else's marriage, the marriage that you think that you want? And so there's this really fascinating book that I've had for many years on my shelf. It's called A History of the Wife, and I've had it for years, and it's always really interesting when I go back to it. I get something new from it each time. And basically, it's a book that looks at how the roles of, what it means to be a wife have changed throughout the years, primarily focused, of course, on like European and North American shifts. But it's a really interesting book. And one of the things that she said under her category of love, marriage, and money is, while it was generally agreed that mutual attraction was desirable, most people also agreed that love was not, in and of itself, all that was needed for an enduring union. Similar social and religious backgrounds, mutual respect, and shared values were also reckoned in the choice of a spouse, not just by society at large, but by the young women themselves. It is instructive for us today to read the letters and diaries of 19th century women as they struggled over proposals. Does that sound familiar to anybody? As they struggled over proposals and tried to determine if an ardent suitor would make a good husband, or if they themselves had the capacity, emotional and otherwise, to become a good wife. So this way of getting married is still around today. I think Muslims are one of the predominant religious groups that sort of still hold on to traditional courtship values, not crossing the lines, not going on dates, being alone, physical things of that nature. Of course, people fall into those things, but it's always considered a poor choice when that happens religiously, because those kinds of behaviors would be considered sinful. So we have a lot of women, getting married, a lot of men getting married, and they're doing this more traditional route, just like she describes. So I think it's really fascinating that she mentions that feelings of love don't have to be present, for people at that time, and I would say even today, to consider each other good for marriage. So mutual respect, background, similar values and things of this nature was really important. And part of that is because for many women, they weren't looking for love when they got married per se. They were looking for stability. They were looking for, security. They were looking for companionship. They were looking for a way to have children. They were looking for a way to not be a burden on their parents, depending on where they were from. But finding love, even though it's so romanticized in movies and films, was not something that people were initially looking for in order to get married. And I think this is so important even today to remember, because you can always create an atmosphere in your relationship where those feelings of love can be developed, they can be strengthened. The feelings of falling in love can certainly be present within a marriage, not just even in the beginning, but even later on in the marriage. We have this idea that once you've fallen in love and that stage is done, or if you never had it, it's never possible. But it is possible, and it's possible by understanding how chemistry works between you and your spouse. What are the things that sort of spark a chemistry between the two of you? What makes you feel like you look at him across the room and think, hey, I like this guy? And what makes him look at you across the room and think, hey, I like this girl? Those things are possible. And people often feel like, well, you know what? We didn't have what people call a love marriage. So now we're having issues. And they're like, maybe that's why. It's not because you didn't have those feelings beforehand that you're having issues. Issues, first of all, are a normal part of marital life. There are always ups and downs, but that question of, can there be chemistry? Can there be those feelings of love? The answer is definitely yes. And we see that with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his marriages. Khadija, as far as we don't know like anything about what was going on inside her heart. But what we do know is that she wanted to get married. She'd been proposed to by a lot of different men, powerful men, rich men, men of, high rank. And she didn't want any of them because that's not what she was looking for. She already had inherited a business. She was a wealthy businesswoman at this point. She didn't want just some other powerful man. She was looking for something special. And so in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she found that special. She found trustworthiness. She found humility. She found kindness. She found in his character what she couldn't find in these other men. And these other men were probably also attractive, well-built men. And we're going to assume that there were very attractive men that came to propose to her too. And she said no. And we know that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, a beautiful man. He had a beautiful face and there are beautiful descriptions about him. But what took her heart was his character. And what took her heart was, the qualities she saw and experience working with him. And that's what made her consider him for marriage. And so these two individuals didn't have or never described a falling in love experience before marriage, but we know the result after their marriage, right? We know what their relationship was like. We know how much they loved each other and adored each other and supported each other. We know that the Prophet ﷺ was deeply and madly in love with Khadija because even after she passed away, even after he married Salama and Aisha and others, even after years had passed, he remembered her. He remembered her friends. He never ever forgot her or mentioning her. His heart always had, a place for her. And so that is solid, true love. And that kind of love beats out any kind of love that you'll find in Hollywood screens or Bollywood screens or any other type of cinema screens. Their love was real. It was solid. And that love was built on a foundation of values, character, and then nurtured by, taqwa and the knowledge of knowing who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and bringing the deen into their life. So I know these are a couple of different tangents, but my overall point is, if you are newly married for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, even 3 years, you're still in those beginning years and you've wondered if your marriage can be filled with beautiful feelings of love when you didn't have them beforehand, the answer is yes. And if you did have those falling in love experiences before you got married and then you got married and now you're thinking, well, all that stuff dried up, what's here now? I want to inspire you by considering and remembering the relationship that the Prophet ﷺ had with Khadija, with remembering that love is something that develops with time, with understanding your husband, with your husband understanding you, with little sacrifices, little compromises, with putting your heart, on your sleeve ultimately, with fearless vulnerability in how you love and give to each other. Love is something that you develop. It is something you nurture. And the deeper the love that you will experience is also based on some of the bigger challenges that you will go through together in life. So hang in there if you're in the beginning. Don't compare yourself to anybody else's relationship, how they met, what their love story is. Some people have these fairy tale sounding stories and other people's are pretty simple and very straightforward. Both of those couples or both of those stories will meet the same place in a relationship, and that is the need to invest in another person and cultivate a marriage with love and passion and intimacy, connection and vulnerability. And marriage requires work for those things to happen. So, once upon a time, there were a lot more women on the earth who probably understood what it feels like to have a more traditional marital arrangement, like many of you today. And so while many people have completely left, pretty much any moral rules or boundaries, they're pretty much everything's out the window, especially living here in the West, pretty much everything's gone. It's important that we continue to hold on to the traditional religious values that we have, and to not let ourselves be intimidated by what seems so rosy on the outside for everybody else, and instead trust that love is cultivated and created by two people who desire to hold each other's hearts. Let me know what you think. Comment below. And if you like this video, please also give it a thumbs up, and remember to subscribe to the Wives of Jannah YouTube channel. Assalamu alaikum.